Forget everything the mainstream media is about to tell you about what happened in the Strait of Hormuz over the past 48 hours, because what Iran just executed across the Persian Gulf is not another provocation, not another flexing of regional muscle, not another headline that will fade by next week's news cycle. What happened beginning at 0314 local time on Sunday morning and continuing through the cascading collapse of Tuesday afternoon is a strategic inflection point that has fundamentally rewritten the equation of global maritime commerce. And by the time I'm done walking you through this, you are going to understand why the smoke over the Gulf this morning marks something the world has not seen in 75 years. 200 autonomous naval drones, roughly 2,400 sea mines deployed in three coordinated waves. 11 commercial vessels confirmed disabled, with three more reporting hull breaches as I'm recording this. The Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which roughly 21 million barrels of oil transit every single day, approximately one-fifth of global petroleum consumption, is not constrained. It is not operating at reduced capacity. It is not under advisory. It is closed, effectively operationally. Insurance market confirmed closed. Lloyd's of London has suspended underwriting for the entire transit corridor. Maersk has rerouted. MSC has rerouted. The Japanese tanker fleet has held position outside the Gulf of Oman, awaiting clarity that is not coming. I want you to sit with that for a moment because I've spent decades inside this exact problem set. I've worked targeting analysis on naval choke points. I've sat in rooms where wargaming scenarios for Hormuz closure get walked through hour by hour by people whose entire careers are built around understanding what happens when this specific waterway stops functioning. And what Iran executed over the last 48 hours is not the scenario any of us gamed. It is something more sophisticated, more layered, and more strategically calibrated than anything Western maritime planners have rehearsed against. Let me explain what these naval drones actually are, because the press is going to call them speedboats with explosives, and that description is going to mislead you in a way that matters. The platform Iran deployed is the Shahid Bagheri-class autonomous surface vessel, a 5.7-meter low-signature hull with a fiberglass composite skin engineered specifically to defeat the radar cross-section detection thresholds of standard naval surveillance suites. It carries a 240-kilogram shaped charge warhead optimized for waterline penetration against commercial hull plating. Its onboard guidance package combines GPS, inertial navigation, and a terminal phase optical seeker that can lock onto a vessel's profile from approximately 800 meters out. For those of you who didn't spend years in naval warfare analysis, let me translate what that means operationally. These drones do not need to be guided by a human operator at the moment of impact. They are launched, they navigate to a designated kill box, they identify a target signature autonomously, and they execute the terminal run without any communications link that can be jammed or intercepted. You cannot stop them with electronic warfare. You cannot turn them off. Once they are in the water and tracking, the only way to neutralize them is kinetic interception. And at the swarm densities Iran deployed over the last 48 hours, kinetic interception is mathematically impossible. But the drones are only one element of what Iran built. And here's where the analysis gets critical, because most commentators are going to fixate on the drones and miss the architecture entirely. Iran did not deploy drones. Iran did not deploy mines. Iran deployed an integrated denial system in which each component reinforces the others in ways that make the whole package exponentially more disruptive than the sum of its parts. The minefield came first. Beginning Saturday night and continuing through pre-dawn Sunday, Iranian fast attack craft and modified commercial fishing vessels seeded approximately 1,400 mines across three distinct corridors: the inbound transit lane north of Larak Island, the outbound transit lane south of Keshem, and a third concentration in the deep water approach to the Gulf of Oman that no commercial planner anticipated because it sits outside the traditional choke point geometry. The mines themselves are a mix of moored contact mines and bottom influence mines that respond to the magnetic and acoustic signatures of vessel transit. That mix is deliberate. Contact mines deny surface traffic. Influence mines deny submarine and deep draft tanker movement. Together they close the column from waterline to seabed. Then came the drones, and the drones did not target warships. The drones targeted the specific commercial vessels whose disabling would maximize the insurance and reinsurance market response. The Suezmax tanker Aphrodite Voyager struck at 0422 Sunday. The VLCC Hanjin Meridian struck at 0611. The container vessel Ever Continuance struck at 0947. Each strike was geographically positioned to ensure the disabled hull would drift into the navigable channel, creating a physical obstruction on top of the mine threat. Iran did not just attack vessels, Iran weaponized the wreckage. That is not improvisation. That is targeting logic designed by people who understand maritime insurance markets, vessel salvage timelines, and the specific commercial pressure points that translate kinetic action into economic paralysis. The timing reveals something even more significant. CO 3.14. Sunday morning is not random. Morning is not. Having spent years studying operational tempo, I can tell you that Aero 314 was the precise window in which the U.S. Fifth Fleet surveillance rotation was at its lowest density of the 7-day cycle, the moment when one carrier strike group was conducting scheduled crew rest and the relieving group had not yet established full coverage. It was the window in which the Bahrain-based maritime headquarters had reduced watch staffing for the Sunday cycle. It was the window in which European insurance markets were closed for the weekend and could not adjust premium structures or issue advisories until Monday morning London open. By the time Lloyd's underwriters convened on Monday at 07 hour GMT, 38 vessels were already inside the threat envelope, 11 were disabled, and the market had no choice but to suspend the entire corridor because there was no actuarial framework for pricing the risk that had emerged overnight. I want you to understand what this does to a global economy that runs on the assumption that this waterway is open. 40% of seaborne oil transits Hormuz, 30% of liquefied natural gas, the entire export economy of Qatar, the bulk of Kuwaiti, Iraqi, Bahraini, and UAE crude, Saudi Arabia's eastern province output. When Hormuz closes, the world does not lose access to some oil. The world loses access to the marginal supply that sets the global price. Brent crude opened Monday at 94. By Tuesday close, it touched 147. Goldman Sachs is modeling sustained closure scenarios at $180 to $220 per barrel. Asian importers, Japan, South Korea, India, China, who collectively absorbed 76% of Hormuz transit volume, are now facing strategic petroleum reserve drawdowns that their domestic stockpiles can sustain for between 18 and 47 days, depending on the country. After that, there is no continuity plan, there is no alternative routing. There is no spare capacity in the global tanker fleet to compensate by sending crude the long way around the Cape of Good Hope at the volumes required. You think you've heard the worst of it? You haven't, because the closure of Hormuz is simultaneously detonating four convergent crises that the global system has never had to manage in parallel. First, the energy crisis I just described, which is already producing fuel rationing announcements in three Asian capitals as of this morning. Second, a shipping insurance crisis in which the war risk premium for any vessel in the broader Gulf region has increased by a factor of 14 in 48 hours, pricing routine commercial transit out of viability for any operator without sovereign indemnification. Third, a naval response crisis in which the United States, the United Kingdom, and France are now contemplating mine clearance operations in waters where the deploying force has explicitly stated that any clearance vessel will be treated as a combatant, and where the surrounding airspace is covered by Iranian coastal anti-ship missile batteries that have been positioned specifically to engage the kind of slow-moving minesweepers that this operation would require. And fourth, a regional escalation crisis in which Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain are now demanding decisions from Washington that their own domestic political situations make almost impossible to refuse and almost impossible to accept. Every one of these crises has been managed sequentially in past Gulf incidents: the 1987 tanker war, the 2019 Abqaiq strikes, the 2024 Red Sea Houthi campaign. Each of those was a single vector problem the international system absorbed because the response capacity could be brought to bear on one issue at a time. What happened over the past 48 hours is the convergence of all of them simultaneously on a global economy that is already running thinner inventory buffers, more leveraged supply chains, and tighter just-in-time logistics than at any point in the post-war era. A threshold has been crossed, and the smoke rising from the Aphrodite Voyager off Larak Island is not just the residue of one disabled tanker. It is the visible marker that the assumption underlying 75 years of global commerce, the assumption that this waterway is functionally guaranteed open by the presence of American naval power, has been demonstrated to be conditional. The decisions that will be made in Washington, in Riyadh, in Tokyo, in Beijing over the next 24 to 48 hours, decisions about military response, decisions about strategic reserve releases, decisions about whether to escalate or absorb, will define not just the next phase of this confrontation, but the operating assumptions of global trade for years to come. What does it say about the level of planning behind an operation that simultaneously closed a waterway, weaponized commercial wreckage, exploited the precise weekend window in which insurance markets could not respond, and positioned the responding navies into a choice between accepting the closure or initiating a shooting war in defense of mine clearance operations? At what point does a system that has spent 75 years assuming this choke point is open have to start making decisions on the assumption that it is not? That is the question being asked behind closed doors in every capital that depends on the Strait of Hormuz this morning, and the smoke over the Gulf drifting east across the Iranian coast and west toward the Arabian Peninsula, visible from Bandar Abbas, from Qasab, from every commercial bridge that has stopped moving in the last 48 hours, is still rising.